Today on Mercedes Garage, the top 7 failures of Mercedes on Mercedes Garage. Hi and welcome back to another episode of Mercedes Garage. We're going to be approaching a very controversial subject today on Mercedes Garage, and I'm sure I will be getting a lot of thumbs down or thumbs ups or negative commentary. We're going to be talking about the top Mercedes failures of all time. But we'll also have a follow-up video of the top successes of Mercedes, so it's not just all going to be negative. So we'll start off with one of the biggest fails of Mercedes was the R-Class. Yes, it was not a bad vehicle. It was not bad looking. But for whatever reason, Mercedes never called it for what it is. It's a minivan. Just call it a minivan or call it a van. One or the other, and it would have been better accepted. People would have caught on to the concept and maybe would have accepted the fact that it was a minivan or a van. But for whatever reason, Mercedes refused to have called this car or vehicle a minivan or a van. So that was a bit of a failure. So the next one, number 2, which should have been much better executed and carried out better, was, wait for it, the X-Class. And here's a picture of it. The Mercedes X-Class was a pickup truck. And you would say, well, what's wrong with making a pickup? Nothing. I think it would have been a great success if Mercedes had did the following things. Sold it in the US. Sell it because it's no longer in production, so it's past tense. Sold it in Canada, sell it in the US, sell it in Mexico, sell it but they picked to sell it in Europe. And I'm sorry, my European friends out there who are watching this, Europe doesn't buy pickup trucks. As watched the Grand Tour episode and several Top Gear episodes where it's not really as common. So for whatever reason, they did not want to bring that vehicle, that truck, to the US. And that was a mistake. It went on for production for about 3 years, and that was it. They sold around 17,000, 18,000 of them, and it's done. Now, I think a better decision would have been, instead of partnering with Renault and Nissan, they should have made it themselves, make it in the Metris factory, Metris Sprinter factory. There's one in America. There's one in Europe, obviously, probably. I'm not sure about that. And make that vehicle into a pickup. That's all they had to do. But it wasn't done. Number 3, the C111. It's not a failure as much as, again, it was like the X-Class. You make a beautiful looking sports car. probably would have been the next generation of the Gullwing. It would have gone down in automotive history as look what new car Mercedes made. Yes, at the time Mercedes was experimenting with the Wankel rotary engine, which was a bit of a mistake. It wasn't going anywhere. But all they had to do was put in a regular engine, change a few basic things with it on the concept car, come out with a new version of it, and it would have been a big success. I think it would have been something that should have been made, and not made with the Wankel engine because it was not reliable enough. They could have, which they did experiment with it. They made 75 or 80 engines and they just weren't working out for them. But they could have put in the current generation, I don't know offhand which, V8 or V6 engine at that time. Not a V6, inline 6 or a V8 engine of that time. And it was in the late 60s, early 70s, so they had plenty of engines from that era. And that's what would have happened. Instead, what ended up with the prototypes was they used them to test diesel engines. The 616 engine and the 617 turbo diesel engines were both tested in that C111 bodies that were after they were done testing the Wankel engines. So that was a mistake. They could have had a very successful car with that. Would have went down in automotive history forever, and they just chose not to go forward with it. The next one, the electronic braking system, or Sentronic brakes, or SBC. This was a braking system that Mercedes came up with in the mid-2000s. As you would see on the screen, it was used in various Mercedes models, not a lot of them. The E-Class was the most notable. SOR McLaren used them. The Maybach used them. And what happened was, it was a bit of a failure. But Mercedes did correct the problems. There's still, check with your Mercedes dealer, there is still, if you have one of these cars, there's still warranties available on fixing the problem that it had been with those braking systems. The next one, as I'm looking at my notes, not having parts for certain older Mercedes vehicles. For whatever reason, W123s, W124s, W126s, W116s, not all the parts are available anymore from Mercedes, which these are classic cars. These are cars that are loved by their owners, and the parts should still be available from Mercedes or from the Classic Center, one or the other. If the consumer is willing to pay for the better part, which a Mercedes part should be and is better than a generic part, why not have it available? That's also a bit of a mistake, which we need to see what the future will bring with that, but as of now, it's a bit of a problem. Number 6, biodegradable wiring. Okay, on the surface of it, you may say that's not a terrible idea. That have the wiring degrade to disintegrate after the car's met its usefulness, and dust doesn't go into a landfill, it just disintegrates. Well, the problem was it was disintegrating when the car was still being used. So that did not work. And Mercedes had to hopefully replace wiring harnesses on all these cars from recalls and other service campaigns to fix that. Now, warning, there is a lot of those cars that are still out there that were not fixed. So you have to be careful if that wiring harness is okay. And basically, in looking at my notes, it's all or most all early 1990s cars. So that's all your E-Class, S-Class from the early 90s would be affected. I'm not sure which model. I know it's a problem on the 120 W124s, the later ones from the 90s, early 90s. They got away from doing that biodegradable wiring harness after about 94, 93. So it was only about 3 to 4 years. You say only, but it's a problem. It should never. It needed to be researched a little bit more before just, let's make cars with that and see what happens. That was a bit of a mistake. But hopefully it has been remedied. There is still, like I said, a few out there that have not been, so hopefully it's okay. Number 7, the sealed for life transmission fluid. This was not only Mercedes, BMW did it, I think Audi, there was a few other manufacturers that were doing this in the early 2000s to about the mid 2000s, that they would have the transmission fluid unserviceable. There's no drain plug, there's no dipstick, there's no way to access it, or if you do, you've seen it on an S-Class, which W220, has a little plastic cap that's on where the dipstick should be for the transmission fluid, and it's basically sealed. It was also on an ML at that time, the W163, W164, I think it was on. So their idea was to never have to change the transmission fluid in the lifespan of the vehicle. Well, the problem happened was there was failures. People were getting 100 and some thousand miles on their transmission. It was still under warranty, and Mercedes had to replace several transmissions because it was under the powertrain warranty, and there was failures before it hit the 100,000, I should say. So that was then remedied by a couple technical service bulletins saying that, whoops, you have to change the transmission fluid every 5 years or 50,000 miles on those cars. So the other top Mercedes fail of all time, the merger of Mercedes and Chrysler. When Mercedes bought Chrysler to form Daimler Chrysler, it was a mistake in a way that it was not a merger of equals as much of a merger no one knew what it would become, and it was a total disaster for both companies. It was a disaster for Mercedes because it lessened their brand, and it was disaster for Chrysler because they really didn't get anything out of it except for having more technology from Mercedes in their cars and dealers that were unable to fix the problems that the cars would have later on. So that's one of the other failures. Like I said, these are some, there might be more out there, but with these problems, but this was a video about the failures. Next time we'll do a video on the successes of Mercedes, which there are many, more so than most automotive companies. So until then, keep watching, hit the thumbs up if you like this video, comment below, and thank you for this 37 subscribers. Keep watching and keep subscribing. It helps the channel out. And keep on motoring in your Mercedes-Benz. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.